Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Clues, which is episode 14 of season 4 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my Patreon user polls. So my latest Patreon user poll was a four-way tie between Balance of Terror, Rejoined, Twilight, and this episode Clues. So my Patreon supporter is very indecisive this month, so I decided, I pick which episode I would like to review, and of course I would love to review all 4 of those episodes, but the one I was kind of disappointed because it lost a Patreon poll before, and I was like, I really wanted to review Clues. So I chose to review, out of those 4, Clues. The Next Generation episode. So Clues is the episode where the Enterprise passes through a wormhole and are unconscious for 30 seconds, and they go about their merry way. But then a lot of evidence comes to light to imply that they were not in fact unconscious for 30 seconds, that they were unconscious for an entire day. However, Data, who was not unconscious at all, insists vehemently that it was only 30 seconds, but the more evidence they uncover implies that he's lying, so they return to the site of the wormhole in order to investigate and find out that they were in fact conscious for 24 hours, but that Captain Picard himself ordered Data to lie and to conceal the truth from them because there is an isolationist alien species called the Paxons who wanted to destroy the Enterprise because they were aware of their existence, which was acceptable to them, so they had made an agreement where the whole crew wiped their memories and they wiped all the information of the Paxons. However, Data was the only one who did maintain this memory, and he was ordered into complete and utter silence for the rest of his life. However, the Enterprise crew, discovering this, put them once again in danger, but Picard convinced the Paxons that the first time was only a run-through, a rehearsal to shake out all the flaws, and this time they would erase all of the clues so they would get it right. So they do it again, and this time it is successful. So this has always been one of my favorite episodes. I think every time I've done a top 10 list, I don't think it's ever made a top 10, but it's always been like an honorable mention. It's always been my top 20, shall we say. It's always been an episode that I've loved. Now, I talked a lot about how the 4th season of The Next Generation was the first season of The Next Generation I really saw. I saw various, when I first started watching Next Generation, the 5th season was airing, so I saw various episodes of the 5th season, I saw various episodes of the 1st season, but really, the 4th season was the one I saw the most episodes from at first, because it was the one that was showing on reruns the most, because it had just hit reruns, so the reruns were showing it over and over again. So it was the episodes that I've seen the most to begin with, and perhaps that's why I look at Clues with a lot of, to me, I would describe this as the quintessential Star Trek Next Generation episode. I think it's not necessarily the best, as I said. There are other episodes that are showcased, like how great Next Generation can be, like All Good Things, or Yesterday's Enterprise, or, The Inner Light, but those are more of exceptions. Those are like the exception of Star Trek Next Generation being exceptional. Whereas Clues, to me, represents a typical Star Trek episode, but in a great way. It's not like, this is just an average Next Generation episode. I'm trying to think of other episodes like that that I kind of just throw away that I think are kind of just average. I think maybe Night Terrors or Identity Crisis or something like those are just average throwaway. That's not what I mean. I mean, it's quintessential. It's like a typical episode of Next Generation, but in the best way possible. Like, it showcases what makes this show so great, and it's like formulated perfectly to highlight like the particular aspects of Next Generation. Now, I talked about when I did my mini aspects of Next Generation video that there's actually different sort of Next Generation is almost several different shows because there's a lot of different tones depending on which season you watch. The first 2 seasons were really cheesy. The last 2 seasons were really dark. The 5th season was really dramatic. Whereas to me, and I talked about this in that video, that season 3 and 4, particularly 4, to me, that's what, when most people think of Next Generation, they think of the tone, they think of the style. Those are mainly the seasons that they think of, that they latch on to, at least me anyway, where you think, oh, this is classic TNG. Usually it's season 3 and 4, particularly 4, I gotta say. And yeah, watching this episode again and really sort of analyzing it, I kept thinking, like, this is what a really good, like, typical Next Generation episode is like. It's like what it is in the best way possible. So it starts out with a holodeck, and again, a holodeck's a very common use in Next Gen, and then you have Guinan come in, and it's pretty memorable holodeck scene. Stands out more than a lot of the others in the series, where it has a classic line of Gloria from Cleveland, where it's this whole episode is like written very well. Like the dialogue is very sharp, like particularly in this scene that actually plays the bit with Guinan arguing with the receptionist, saying, "Oh, I'm Gloria from Cleveland," and the receptionist not letting her in to see Picard or Dixon Hill, and that was like really well written dialogue. It may seem to others like filler, you're just filling up time and treading wheels or whatever, but it was actually like a great way to describe like Guinan's character. It was a great exploration for Guinan, and I think a lot of times I actually think Guinan's underused. Like, she's the stereotypical wise bartender who just advises everyone and just says, oh, and seems to know everything. Well, here she felt more like an actual person, where she's like had no idea how to put on the stockings or whatever, and how she was just confused on the whole concept of what a mystery is. And of course, when she does get in and have the interactions with Picard, and they're acting, and it's a Dixon Hill novel, so it's supposed to be kind of very cliche and stereotypical gumshoe type, and have the guy going, "I'm through talking, sweetheart," and she really like throws herself in the role and does and it's kind of the way you would expect someone who's not a professional actor, although this is Whoopi Goldberg, but she's playing Guinan, who is not a professional actor, to just because it is a silly situation that is kind of over dramatized, with the guy saying, "You stole money, you stole." So she kind of throws herself in the role and adds to it and goes, "Oh, Johnny, oh, talk to me, Johnny," doing over the top, which makes complete sense. And actually, because it ends up, it's interesting contrast, because it ends up being even more over the top than what the Dixon Hill thing is. And again, this is where Picard kind of explains the whole concept of a mystery, and I think it's actually a perfect setup for this episode. In some ways, I might, the doubting part of me might think, oh, this is too on the nose, that it's going to be a mystery, but not really. As I said, I think this is classic TNG, TNG at its best, where it uses these social interactions, particularly the holodeck, to sort of make commentary on the episodes to come. And I think it's probably one of the best examples of that, because I think of this episode in season 3, The Defector, which is an episode I absolutely love. I think it's an amazingly good episode, a really powerful one. But it starts out with a holodeck program with Data doing Shakespeare, and Picard, Patrick Stewart's playing holodeck characters, and Picard is there, so that's a bit confusing. But anyway, I think of that scene actually doesn't really add anything to the episode. That holodeck scene just seems to be there just as filler, just to kind of fill up time, and it tries to make commentary on the episode that's come, but I don't think it does a particularly good job at it. Where here, I think it's amazing setup. I think it does an absolutely great job of completely setting the scene of why Picard is fascinated in mystery, and of course his fascination with Dixon Hill is something that's already been established on the show, so they just revisit that and sort of to re-emphasize that Picard is very interested in mystery, and of course that is very relevant for the rest of the episode, actually extremely relevant. So it's actually amazing setup, and more than just Picard, he explains in general how human beings are interested in mystery. When there's some inkling of a mystery, something, it's fun and fascinating, sometimes like obsessive to the point where they just have to unravel this mystery, which is basically what happens, which is the driving force of this episode. So I think this holodeck scene is absolutely perfect. It's probably one of the best setup, and of course, like the whole setup of this episode is that they're having free time, and it shows like them doing Worf doing the calisthenics and Crusher with her like little plants and whatnot. And I think that's probably, again, that shows that this spaceship is not just a working environment. People live there, and I've other people described the Enterprise D as an apartment complex in space, which is pretty accurate. Like, this is a community, and it's episodes like these that really like drive home that it is a community, and these people do like have to have free time and recreation and live in this community that is not just all a military work environment. And that's something that I think like Voyager explored in its first 2 seasons, and why I think that show kind of went downhill in its later seasons, because it kind of stopped exploring that. But that's another topic entirely. So then the episode goes on to do the wormhole, and which is a fascinating concept, where it starts off ends the teaser, I mean, with everyone becoming unconscious except for Data, and it's like, da-na! And Data looks around and see that that everyone's unconscious, and then we cut to, they're all waking up from the wormhole. But as we learn later in the episode, that's actually not true. That there's a lot of events we just skipped over from the time the opening credits came on to the time we come back for the first act. That it actually skipped a day, and that's kind of the whole point. And that and they kind of lay out the format of the episode in the episode, which I think is actually, not only is there nothing wrong with it, I actually think it's kind of brilliant the way that they do it, where just one thing leads to another. It starts with the big thing. It starts with Crusher finding out that her plants had 24 hours worth of growth, which makes no sense. And then they find other things like a transporter trace that says everyone has an internal clock, and it finds out that the internal clock is off, saying that more time has passed. And then there's just more things that lead to another, and it's really interesting watching this from a character's perspective for Data, because it shows how bad Data is at lying, which makes sense, because they even said, like Picard and I never known Data to lie, and yet. And it shows that he's not very good at it, because that's not what he was programmed to do. That he's not, and it's not in his personality. He is a living being, and he's not the type to lie. And so he's a bad liar, because most liars, as Garrick will tell you, it's a skill. Lying is a skill that you need to practice to keep sharp at. And so Data's not. He's not good at it. And so you can tell like this throughout the episode, because whenever there's a discrepancy that doesn't make sense, Data kind of butts in and like comes up with some bullshit excuse. Well, the reason, blah blah. And the thing is that he's always so willing to interrupt, to butt in, and to explain away things that happen, and that is not how Data would behave in normal normal situations. Normally, if there's a discrepancy, he'd be like, he wouldn't butt in and try to be like, actually, that's not right. This explains it away. Your hypothesis is dumb. Now, he doesn't say it like that, of course. He says it in his data way. But normally, he would just sit aside and listen and contribute what he needs to contribute. It's like, what an interesting mystery. Okay, let's help solve that. But here, he's like always too ready to come up with an explanation that explains, oh, no, you don't understand. This explains who we're at for just 30 seconds. No, this explains that. And in fact, the fact that he does that really does humanize Data a lot. And I actually love those episodes of Next Gen that do humanize Data. Because I think watching Next Generation, I watched the entire show recently. I noticed some of the writers are inconsistent with Data and some don't really know how to write for him. So sometimes he comes off as too robotic and sort of too android-like, which I think are kind of the worst examples of people writing for Data. But other cases like this, they really humanize him and they treat him more human. And so in this case, it shows how he inside, even though he doesn't experience fear, he'll be the first one to tell you that, he's actually afraid of the ship being destroyed. He's afraid of the crew finding out what really happened, because that would lead to their deaths. So he is going out of his way to block them from finding out, but in doing so, he's being a bit too obvious about it. And so he sticks out. His behavior seems weird, seems strange, seems out of character to Riker, Picard, and Geordi and the others who know him well and know that this is not how he would normally act in this situation. Therefore, and that's part of what clues them in to something's wrong. In fact, Picard even mentions that as one of the clues. He mentions stuff like, Crusher's plans, Worf's wrists, Troy's visions, and he mentions Data's odd behavior as one of the stepping stones. And that's absolutely the case. And he's human. Not human, but it shows how human he is, that he's flawed, that he's not very good at lying. And so when he tries to hide it, he goes overboard, too much out of his way to try to misdirect him, so much so it becomes obvious that, in speaking of bad acting, that he's a bad actor and they can see through him. Particularly the time when he tries to explain away how Crusher's plans grew for 24 hours. He said, it's possible that they went through this wormhole and they went through the wormhole and they were there for 24 hours and then they came back. And when he leaves the room, it's funny. I love that scene, how Picard's like, what an interesting hypothesis. And Crusher wants to speak up and be like, no, that's bullshit. And Picard silences her, and it's like, okay, Data, go do something else. And then once he leaves the room, then he can have a frank conversation, and he asks Geordi, and he says, I want a straight answer, Commander. And LaForge is just like, I'm amazed he would say this. There's absolutely no chance that's true. and that's great. That's perfect character stories, and you really get a feel for the ensemble, the crew, and how they know each other and how they relate to each other and how they can pick up on each other's bullshit. But at the same time, it shows how, rather than being fearful of Data or directing anger at him, that they're concerned about him. And Geordi even says that when he has the scene when he's examining Data, he shows his concern and saying, I'm really worried about you, and can you please, as a friend, can you tell me what's going on? And Data, of course, scared as hell for his friend's life, says, no, I cannot tell you. And I love how Picard really whittles down at Data. In fact, because they learn more and more, the more they learn, the more they know for a fact that he's full of shit. And they get to the point where Geordi found out that he completely fabricated the probe he sent and just took a planet from their library and just put a little distortion in it to make it look different, but really it was just taken from the library, and they can tell, and they sort of caught him red-handed, and Picard really like whittles him down, and finally he's able to get to the point where Picard figures out from Data's behavior, because Picard knows Data very well, he figures out that Data is lying to protect them. And it becomes obvious, even though Data's trying to hide the fact that he's lying to protect them, he can tell that whatever Data's doing, he's doing because he believes it's the right thing to do. Because he believes he's protecting the crew. And it's interesting, because they come to a point in the episode where they surmise that there was a stalemate. And I like how they reasoned this out, because they said, we were awake for these 24 hours, but we were probably in a fight for our lives. And someone points out, well, the fact that we're still alive would suggest that we won that fight. But Picard's like, no, Data's odd behavior and everything else going on suggests that we didn't win. So, Worf is like, well, if we didn't win, or if we did, and we didn't lose, then Picard's like, well, then the only answer is a stalemate. And perhaps we're upsetting that stalemate by returning, but Data's role in this needs to be explained if he's ever going to be trusted in Starfleet again. So, at this point, Picard knows that he's risking the ship. He's putting the ship at risk, but he does it for his friend, for Data, to figure, because he knows that Data's career in the Starfleet will be finished. And of course, to be fair, that's not the only reason. The other reason is to satisfy his curiosity, because that's the other thing that the show has been driving home, how humans are so driven by a mystery and driven to solve that mystery, that Picard's desire to solve this mystery also is overriding him. And then so you enter the moment with Troy being taken over by the alien, which to me is something that me and my sister always quoted to each other all the time, because I think it's a really classic moment. Because it was, watching it for the first time, it was really creepy and scary and seemed to come out of nowhere, because of course the way this episode disseminates information, you have no idea what happened in those 24 hours and what's going on, and all of a sudden Troy shows up, gets this green mist, like hits the shields, and Worf's like, oh, nothing happened, and so everyone on the bridge is like, oh, that's fine, nothing happened, didn't really do anything to us. But we see it actually it does do something, because it goes into Troy, inhabits their body, and she goes to Data and goes, the plan has failed. And that, I think, was one of the most iconic moments in the entire show, because that is really creepy. That really creeped me the hell out. And especially when when the way she talks to Data, where Data's like, you don't really need to destroy the ship. Please just do nothing. We can figure something out. And in a really dark and really suspenseful way, shows like the stakes are fucking high. That these aliens are mean business and they want to destroy the ship, and having Troy going around going, the plan has failed, with a really intense way to do that. And then, of course, Picard then grills Data once they're there, and Data the whole time is like, we gotta leave, let's go. And Picard is just like, no, we're not going anywhere till I figure out what's going on. And I love how this is the moment where Picard deduces that someone ordered Data to do this, because and I love, you see this sort of aha moment where Picard's like trying to figure this out, and he's like, oh, what's going on? He's like, wait a second, were you contacted by Starfleet? Did someone order you to do it? Because he starts to realize that, has he already deduced that Data was doing this to save their lives, and Data kept talking about how him lying to them was not by choice. And so finally, and Data reemphasizes this, that it's not by choice, and then Picard is able to put it together. It's like, wait a second, so if it's not by choice, you were given an order. Did someone from Starfleet contact you? And then finally, like, Troy comes on the bridge, and then Data knows that they're fucked, And so he realizes that he finally has to give in and tell them the truth because they're all about to be destroyed anyway. And then Picard turns to him and says, "Who gave you that order?" And Data gives that awesome, "You did, sir." Dun dun dun! And that was such an amazing, chilling, groundbreaking moment. I mean, it sent chills down my spine. I thought it was absolutely amazing. Like, "You did, sir." And then, of course, they get a break. We come back, and Data lays it all out and explains everything. And all little clues now start to make sense, and everything fits into place. And so now we know what the mystery solved. Way to go, Picard. Except now the Paxtons want to destroy the ship again. And then Troy's like, "The plan has failed. You must be destroyed." And Picard, of course, being the master negotiator, I love how he reasons this out. He's like, wait. We can do this again. It will work this time. Because this time, we're going to eliminate the clues. And again, it explains the whole theme of the episode, how all these clues were left over. And to humans, it created a mystery that was irresistible, that they just needed to solve. And so he insists, if we get rid of all the clues this time and erase them, this time it will work. And so, of course, the Paxtons are like, "Oh, you are an interesting species worthy of a second chance." And so, that was a weird imitation. But anyway, so they give him a second chance, and the episode ends. And so they go through the wormhole, and we go through the whole thing again, where Data's like, "Oh, we were just out for 30 seconds. And we see, like, Picard sort of thinking, and Riker's like, "Should we go back?" And Picard's thinking about it. And they play that musical cue. And that's like really, to me, it's like really like chilling. And he says, "Nah, let's just go on." So they move on. And so it's kind of implied that they drop it and mission solved. And in fact, it ends on this like long close-up shot of Data, which is beautiful. And I love Brent Spiner's acting here because it's really subtle. Like, characters like Data and Spock and Tuvok, who are emotionless, quote unquote, they're not really, though. There is some humanity in them, but it's really subtle, and you have to look for it. And I love the shot because it shows how satisfied and how relieved Data is that it worked this time. And it's just an amazing way to end the episode. Just absolutely amazing. So another thing I wanted to mention is that I do have a hard time believing that they were able to pull off the sort of second wormhole deception and were able to make it to actually get rid of all the clues, as Picard suggested. And that's clearly what the ending of the episode implied. But I actually have a hard time buying that they could pull it off because, alright, so it seems like a lot of things that they couldn't correct for. Like, they can correct for Dr. Crusher's plans, and granted that is the first clue that really starts them thinking, but other stuff such as Data, getting something from the library for the probe, he could maybe disguise it a bit better. And they can't change the fact that Worf's wrist was mended. They can't change the internal clock, the transporter trace. They can't change the fact that Troy is still going to be feeling a bit iffy because her face was used as a mask. So it does make me wonder, and that was a lot of, and also the fact that that LaForge could go and find that the clock was tampered with. So I'm not sure. Maybe maybe the episode's implying that somehow they will find a way to hide all those things, that maybe they'll do something to Worf's wrist to make it impossible for Crusher to find out it had been broken and mended, and maybe that they'll find some way to fool the transporter trace, or to make it so LaForge can't figure out the clock was changed, but and maybe the Paxsons will do something to Troy to make her not have after effects, but that's a far-fetched. Like, all those things, it seems like they couldn't block, and those are the majority of the clues. It seems like the only clue they really have any control over is Crusher's plans. And so if that's all they fixed, then all the other clues are still going to be there. And plus, I often wondered, like, I think they say I'll have a line there to change the clock to adjust to the time, to adjust for the wormhole distortion, which would explain why, to them, why their clocks are 2 days behind everyone else. But it does make me think that adjusting for 2 days rather than 1 day is actually going to be twice as hard. In fact, it's a bit more than 2 days, because there was all that time in between the visits, so it's almost 3 days at this stage that they're going to say that they missed, and it seems like that would be even harder to adjust to, that there would be even more clues that they can't account for left behind. But whatever, let's just forget all this so we can have a nice happy ending where everything I mean, I don't know, it wouldn't make sense to me if Data's cover story wasn't 30 seconds. Data maybe could have said, oh, we were in stasis for, as a wormhole, they tossed us around and we were in stasis for 2 days, and then, so if anyone finds any evidence, like, and they should have done this in the first place, actually, of like plants that grew or whatever, Data could just say, oh, this shit grew whatever, because we were actually, you guys were out for 2 days. No, not 30 seconds, but whatever. I just think that would be easier, but I don't know. Of course, I love this episode so much that I'm willing to go with this ending anyway, but that's just the thought I had. Now, I want to digress a bit and talk about a topic. In fact, I think I should do a whole video just on this topic now. But maybe I will do that eventually. But I think especially thought of it while watching this episode and this is something I touched on early on, is the music. Is how the music is absolutely brilliant in this episode. How I love the subtleties involved. Like, of course, the Dixon Hill music was very, setting appropriate, but it's very appropriate. Like how it's slow. It really helps build the tension, like, immensely. Like, it puts you in the mindset of just how, Picard feels about the fact that Data's lying to him, and just how it really just edges the tension in a way that just works so beautifully. And as I said, like that ending, that music at the end, particularly where it shows Picard when he's thinking about, oh, should I do this, should I do that, and it's like, it really, like, the scene would be so much less without that music. Like, the music just adds so goddamn much to the show. Particularly, and also like the music that played during the scene when the Paxsons took over and the plan has failed. Like, that was like in really creepy, eerie music that added to the intenseness of the scene. Like, I feel like the reason why I felt this episode so intensely is a lot of it had to do with the music, which I love. Now, the composer for this episode was Dennis Mccarthy. And I realized that Dennis McCarthy is my favorite composer in all of Star Trek. Now, I bring this up because there is a YouTube channel that I watch constantly that I really enjoy, and I think is a great YouTube channel. Lore Runner, who's very sort of analytical and delves into his thoughts. And I absolutely love the hell out of that channel, and I definitely recommend it. However, Lord Runner often talks about how, well, let's say he badmouths Dennis McCarthy and says how much, well, maybe that's not being fair to him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but to me it seems like he does, and that he he's very vocal about the fact that he prefers Ron Jones. And I'm sorry, and this you can chalk it up to opinion, but I have to very strongly disagree with that. Now, Ron Jones did the music for the first couple seasons. I think he did it up to maybe partway through season 3. The one that Lore Runner brings up the most is the episode Booby Trap, which does have decent music. Like, don't get me wrong, I did like the music for Booby Trap, but I actually much prefer Dennis McCarthy's style. Lore Runner describes it as wallpaper music, which I personally think is being completely unfair to it. To be fair, Lore Runner specifically said that Dennis McCarthy wasn't a bad composer. He just said there was generic wallpaper music, which I completely disagree with. I actually think this music is perfect and exactly what you want for a show like The Next Generation. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Ron Jones' music was too invasive, that it was too overpowering, where the fact that McCarthy's music is so subtle, to me, when I think Next Generation, I think Dennis McCarthy, as far as music goes. I think he is the heart and soul of not just the music, but of the tone of Next Generation, really. And that's just me personally. I talk a lot when I did a review of season 7 of Next Gen, which gets a lot of shit, how the music of season 7 is one of the things that stuck with me the most, that it really drove home to me. In fact, Dennis McCarthy did the music for the movie Star Trek Generations, and by far I think that movie had the best music out of all the Next Generation films, by far. Now, Jerry Goldsmith did the soundtracks to First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis. And although I thought the soundtrack to First Contact was okay, it was passable, I thought the soundtracks to Insurrection and Nemesis were awful. Downright awful, especially the one for Nemesis. Mind you, I actually liked the movie Nemesis. I actually thought the music was one of the worst things about that movie. I thought that music was downright cheesy and terrible. Now, I know Jerry Goldsmith, he's a well-known film composer who's done a lot of famous films, and that's probably why they had him do it. But I actually think that was a mistake. Jerry Goldsmith may be the better composer in terms of just classical movies and the more well-known composer, but I think Dennis McCarthy is more true to what Star Trek Next Generation is. And so I think part of the issues with those films is that they didn't have Dennis McCarthy doing the music. I think, by the way, his score for Generations was easily the best thing about that film. I thought that score for Generations was amazing. And speaking of great scores Dennis McCarthy did, he did the score, I think it was Emmy nominated, and it was on a CD. They released the CD for it for the episode Yesterday's Enterprise, and the music for that episode was absolutely fantastic. And I'm bringing this up in clues because it was very noticeable in this episode. To me, it's one of the most staples that made this episode so great is the punctuation, at the end, as I talked about, or when the green thing took over Troy, no plan has failed. This episode would be half of what it was without this music. And I would argue that if you had someone like Ron Jones do the music for it, it wouldn't be that good because it would be too invasive. I think you need something that's subtle, and really just enhances the scene to the fullest extent. In fact, when I watched this episode, I noted that this was a Dennis McCarthy soundtrack before I logically knew that. And after I watched it, I looked it up on IMDb, and sure enough, composer Dennis McCarthy. And I can recognize this music because I think it's brilliant. I think, to me, it's signature of Next Generation. But that's just me. And sorry about that. It was totally, that was a totally off-the-cuff discussion that was veering way off. But whatever. I'm sorry. It was just, I couldn't help but think about this when I watched the episode, and I wanted to get that off my chest. As I said, one of these days I'm going to do a whole video about this. Anyway, my rating for Clues out of 10, I'm going to give this episode a 10. The best. I think in the past I've rated this episode as a 9. Just because it's almost like a bottle episode, and it is like mostly just taking place on the ship and mostly people talking. But as I talked about before, I actually love that kind of thing. And I think the whole way this episode is constructed, from the holodeck thing, from the character interactions throughout, from building the mystery and really showing how this crew is a community that cares about each other, and really also at the same time having a suspenseful story with a shocking payoff that has twists and turns, and at the same time delves into human nature very well, all while being a bottle episode that takes place entirely on the ship. It's amazing writing. It's amazing writing. It's an accomplishment. And as I said, I think the music is amazing and really elevates the episode a whole lot. So, yeah, fuck that 9. I'm going to give it a 10. The best. I absolutely love this episode, and I do think there's a reason why it constantly makes my top 20. If not top 10, maybe I would reconsider that top 10 thing, but I don't know. There's a lot of great episodes, so it's kind of hard to squeeze it in there. But, damn, do I love this episode. Anyway, that is it for my review of Clues. Gotta thank you so much for all those who support my channel on Patreon. Absolutely holds me up and keeps me going, and I appreciate the hell out of it. And I do hope doing these Patreon videos that you guys get to vote on, I hope that helps show my appreciation of how much your support means to me. It's just a little token. Anyway, and of course, even if you can't support me on Patreon, your support is still very much appreciated. You know, subscribing, liking, commenting, love the interaction with my viewership. All that is still very much appreciated as well. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel as I do many more Star Trek reviews, and I also cover other shows like The Expanse, Breaking Bad, The Outer Limits, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.